Some people go their entire lives carrying a secret that would change everything if it ever got out. And then, for whatever reason, they open Reddit, create a throwaway account, and just type it out. What you're about to hear are real confessions, posted publicly by real people. And some of them are going to mess with your head in ways you weren't expecting. Let's get into it. Okay, so I want to start with this one because it's not just disturbing in terms of what the person said, it's disturbing because of how they said it and the chaos that followed. It was a Saturday night in April 2013. A Reddit user going by the name Narado posted something in the r/adviceanimals subreddit. If you know Reddit even slightly, you know that subreddit. It's where people post memes, funny image macros, lighthearted, harmless stuff, the kind of thing you scroll past and chuckle at. Narado posted a confession bear meme. If you've never seen it, it's literally just a photo of a small bear looking guilty and said, Narado's caption said this: "My sister had an abusive meth addict boyfriend. I killed him with his own drugs while he was unconscious and they ruled it as an overdose." That's it. Just that. Posted on a meme, under his actual account, not even a throwaway. Within minutes, the post had thousands of views, and Reddit did what Reddit does. People started treating it seriously. They pulled up his comment history, he'd been active on the platform for a long time, and had left a trail of details: his job, his military background, where he lived, his middle name. Someone connected it all to a real name, Colton Goodbrand, a 24-year-old with ties to San Diego. The post generated over 3,000 comments. The debate in those comments was genuinely wild. Some people were defending him, saying the abusive boyfriend deserved it, that he'd protected his sister. Others were absolutely horrified. At least one person submitted a tip to the FBI. Now here's where it gets complicated. When the pressure started mounting, Narado came back and tried to walk it back. He said it was a joke, that he'd posted this wondering what would happen, and that only some of it was true, but he wasn't saying which parts. He tried to laugh it off, and then he deleted his account entirely. That deletion is what really got people, because if it was just a joke, why run? Later, a man named Colton Goodbrand, the person Reddit had identified as Narado, confirmed to a journalist at Gawker that yes, he had made the post, but he described the claim that he'd actually taken someone's life as a rumor. He said he did post those words, he just wasn't confirming whether the confession was real. And that's where it ends. No arrest, no investigation that went anywhere publicly, just the man who posted something on a bear meme, watched the entire internet try to find him, deleted everything, and then said, "I didn't say it was true," but also didn't say it wasn't. The post received over 10,000 upvotes before it was deleted. It was covered by ABC News, RT, UPI, Slate, and the Daily Dot. And to this day, nobody actually knows what the truth is. This one came from r/confessions and was featured in a widely shared Reddit recap that's been archived and referenced multiple times. The post has since been deleted, which is common for confessions this serious, but the content was preserved and covered by multiple sources before it came down. The person who wrote this was a vendor on the dark web. They weren't selling anything violent, they sold psychedelics, specifically mescaline, which they described as their specialty. They had a reputation on the marketplace, repeat customers, good ratings. They genuinely seemed to believe in whatever twisted logic they'd constructed for themselves, that they were running a responsible operation. Their words, not mine. Then, one day, they made a mistake. They had 2 packages ready to go out, 2 separate orders, and somehow, in the kind of catastrophic mix-up that you'd think would be impossible to make if you were slightly careful, they sent the wrong substance to several customers. Instead of mescaline, those customers received something else entirely, something exponentially more lethal: fentanyl. If you don't know what fentanyl is, it's a synthetic opioid that's 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. It's used in controlled medical settings in tiny, precise doses, because the margin between a therapeutic dose and a fatal dose is razor thin. Somebody who has never used opioids, who ordered a psychedelic expecting a particular kind of experience, has essentially zero chance of surviving an accidental fentanyl dose of any meaningful quantity. The people who received those wrong packages did not survive. Multiple customers, multiple fatalities. And the person who sent those packages wrote about it on Reddit. They said they discovered what happened when orders stopped getting marked as received, when messages started coming in that didn't make sense, when they put it together. They said they quit immediately, shut everything down, disappeared from the marketplace without an explanation, but they could not disappear from themselves. What they described in the post wasn't defiance. It wasn't someone trying to justify what happened. It was someone drowning in what they'd caused. They said they live in what they called constant sobriety now, going to work, coming home, playing video games, just going through the motions, waiting maybe for something to happen, either internally or externally, because they couldn't fully accept that they were allowed to just continue living after what they did by accident. They wrote they didn't know if they deserved to still be here. The post is gone, but the content was preserved in a podcast recap on Veepcast that documents the full transcript. The person never gave their name, never identified their location, never gave enough detail to be traced. They just needed to say it somewhere. And what they said has been living in the heads of everyone who read it ever since. All right, I have to be really careful with how I frame this one because it's genuinely one of the most disturbing confessions I have ever read. Not because of shock value, because of the layers to it. Because the more you sit with it, the more you realize there are no clean answers anywhere in this story. The post was titled, "I stood by and allowed my wife to almost take our son's life. I was happy she did it." It went viral. Absolutely viral. It's been screenshotted and shared thousands of times. It's been read on TikTok, where individual videos got over 600,000 likes. It's been debated in comment sections for years, and the original Reddit post, posted under the username Crazy Son Throwoff on r/confessions, has the URL reddit.com/confessions, comments/C93GEN, and was widely archived before it was removed. The post opens with a warning from the author himself. He says this is long. He says he's been carrying it for years. He said his therapist told him to write it out. Not to post it to Reddit, just to write it. But he needed outside judgment because he genuinely doesn't know how to feel about what he let happen. His son, he says, was born wrong. That's the phrase he uses. From the day we brought him home, he was wrong. This isn't a story of a difficult child, a fuzzy child, a child with behavioral challenges that many families face. This is something different and darker. The father describes a child who from infancy seemed to have no capacity for connection, not just difficult, hollow, blank in a way that the father says he can only describe as alien. As the boy grew, things escalated. He was removed from school after school. He stole knives and used them to gouge furniture, to chase people through the house. At 10 years old, he stabbed his father in the hip and lower back during an argument. The father still has the scars. The father describes having to replace all the interior doors in their home with heavy solid wood doors fitted with keyed locks, not to lock the son in, so that the parents could lock themselves into rooms for safety. They were prisoners in their own house, locked away from their own child. Then came the day that everything changed. The father and mother had a newborn daughter, and one afternoon the mother heard the baby screaming from a different room. She ran in and found their teenage son standing over the baby with a knife, not cutting her, the father says, but dragging the back of the blade slowly across her face, teasing. And when the parents came through the door, the son looked up at them and smiled. The mother moved first. She batted the knife across the room, shoved her son with everything she had so that he hit the wall. The father scooped up the baby and got her out. And then he stood there in the hallway while behind the closed door he heard his wife, a former amateur athlete with real serious combat training, systematically and methodically beat her son. He heard everything. He could have opened the door. He could have stopped it. He chose not to. He took the baby to the kitchen, gave her a bath, cleaned the cuts on her, 3 cuts, the father says, all superficial, and waited until the sound stopped. And when he writes about that moment, he doesn't describe guilt, not in that moment. He describes a release, something releasing, a thing he'd been holding for years finally being let go. He writes he didn't beat his son himself, but he allowed it to happen, and he was glad it happened. The son disappeared from their lives not long after. The father doesn't explain exactly how, just that at some point he was gone. And the family, the father, the mother, the daughter, were finally, after years, safe in their own home. But the guilt came later, years later, because whatever that boy was, wherever he is now, he was still their child. And there will never be a clean answer to the question of whether what the father did or didn't do was something a person can be forgiven for. He posted it because he needed someone to tell him, and thousands of people responded. This one is quieter than the others. No violence, no crime, but in its own way, it unsettled me more than almost anything else in this list, because of how many people, after they read it, said, I know exactly what you mean. A woman posted an r/Throwoff my chest using a throwaway account. She'd been caring for her mother for several years. Her mother had a degenerative illness, she doesn't say which one, that had progressively stripped away the person she'd known. The sharp, funny, fiercely independent woman her mother had been was, piece by piece, being replaced by someone who didn't always recognize her, who sometimes screamed at her, who had, in the later stages, become physically combative during care. The poster was the only child. There was no one else. She'd reorganized her entire life around this, given up her career, her relationship, her social existence. Everything folded inward to become this one consuming task, keeping her mother alive and as comfortable as possible. And then one day she posted, and she said, "I have started to wish she would go." She said it carefully. She wasn't wishing suffering on her mother. She was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She'd been living in a grief that had no defined endpoint, mourning someone who was still physically present, but gone in every way that actually mattered. And the body that remained was suffering, and she had started to feel, beneath all the love and all the loyalty, a quiet, desperate hope that it would just end, for both of them. She said she had told no one, that she felt like a monster, that she had cried for 3 days after first noticing the feeling because she didn't know what it meant about who she was. The post got tens of thousands of responses, and what poured in was something that I think a lot of people who work in palliative care already know but rarely say out loud. This experience is so common that there are clinical terms for it: caregiver grief, anticipatory mourning, the guilt of loving someone so much that you start to want the suffering to stop, theirs and yours, even when stopping means losing them. What she described isn't monstrous. What she described is what love looks like when it's been stretched past the point where any human being can hold it together perfectly. But nobody had ever said that to her until she posted it anonymously on Reddit at 2 in the morning when she was out of tears. This one circulated across Reddit and then spread far outside it because the concept of it is so viscerally terrifying that once you read it, it attaches to you. You think about it when you walk into your own home. You find yourself looking at corners and walls differently. A young woman started posting on Reddit in what she framed as a general anxiety thread. She wasn't even posting in a horror or mystery subreddit. She was just venting, saying she'd been feeling uneasy in her apartment for a while, that she was having trouble sleeping properly and waking up feeling heavy and foggy in a way she couldn't explain, that she kept noticing small things. Objects moved slightly from where she'd left them, a faint smell she couldn't source, the feeling when she came home sometimes that the air was different in a way that wasn't quite right. She thought it was her mental health. She thought it was the stress of living alone. She thought she was building a paranoid narrative out of nothing, and she was embarrassed about it. Reddit didn't let it go. People started asking specific, grounded questions, not ghost theory questions, practical ones. Does anyone else have a key? Has your landlord ever let himself in without notice? Is there a crawl space in the building? Does your unit share ventilation with the unit next door? What does the outside of the building look like compared to the interior square footage? That last question, that's the one. Someone encouraged her to actually measure, to look at her apartment from the outside and think about whether the interior dimensions match what the exterior suggested, whether there was space unaccounted for. There was. Behind the section of wall in her bedroom, there was a space, accessible, and the landlord's son had been using it. He had a way in. He had been in her apartment, repeatedly, while she slept. The extreme drowsiness that came and went, the fog that she chalked up to bad sleep, investigators later determined was not coincidental. He had been there, in the dark, while she was unconscious in her own bed, in what she believed was the most private and protected space she had. The story broke into mainstream coverage and true crime communities and never really left, because there's something about it that cuts through in a way that pure fiction can't. The months of her posting about feeling uneasy, the ordinary, relatable experience of second-guessing your own instincts, the fact that she was right, she had felt something real, and the system around her made her feel crazy for it. She wasn't crazy. She was the only one paying attention. We covered the Confession Bear murder story at the top of this video, but I want to come back to something in that story that I didn't fully unpack earlier, because it raises a question that's genuinely uncomfortable. Thousands of people read Naruto's post. Thousands of people debated whether it was real, and the response that Reddit gave was interesting. A portion of the community went full investigative mode, found his name, his military history, his location, his social media, posted it publicly. Another portion of the community defended the alleged act, said that if an abusive man was taken out of the world, that was a net positive, that if the person was telling the truth, they shouldn't be investigated at all. And a small number of people, the ones who took it seriously enough, reported it to the FBI. What's uncomfortable about this is that nobody actually knows the outcome. The account was deleted. The real-world person identified as Naruto said he made the post, confirmed that, but wouldn't confirm whether the confession itself was true. There is a man who said he took someone's life, in what he described as a defensible way, and then the internet either found him or didn't, and then he disappeared. And somewhere there may be a death record for a man whose cause of death was ruled an overdose that might not have been an accident. Or it was a very dark joke. The post received 10,190 upvotes and generated one of the heated comment debates in Reddit's history up to that point. It was covered by ABC News, covered by Slate, covered by UPI. Police were contacted, federal authorities were contacted. And then it just went quiet. This one is back from the Ask Reddit thread that has become one of the most referenced archives of Reddit confessions. And I keep coming back to it because the more you think about it, the worse it gets. The setup. Someone asked Reddit what the creepiest confession they'd ever seen was, and one user responded with this. There was a man. He was obsessed with a woman. Not in the way people casually use that word, but in the kind of way that involves months of planning and deliberate, calculated steps. He learned everything about her. Her schedule, her social circle, who she trusted, who she was romantically interested in. She had feelings for someone, a real man in her life she was genuinely interested in. So this man hacked that person's computer, got full access to his files and his accounts. And then he didn't just snoop, he built a case. He planted content, fabricated digital files, created a false picture of this other person as someone dangerous, someone obsessive, someone to be afraid of. Then he stepped in as the concerned friend, the one who helped her see what was really going on. He helped her report the other man, helped her pursue a restraining order, watched as the man he had framed, who had done absolutely nothing, was legally removed from her life. And then, once the path was cleared, he pursued her. She trusted him completely. She fell for him. And he married her. She never found out. As of the time that confession was shared, she had no idea. She believed she had married someone who had helped protect her from a threat. The threat was him. The person who shared this on Reddit called it the creepiest thing they had ever read. And I've been thinking about it since I first came across it because of the sheer machinery of it. The patience, the planning, the fact that a real innocent person had their life disrupted, had a legal record attached to them, had a restraining order, based on fabricated evidence planted by someone who just wanted the woman he was obsessed with. And somewhere right now, that man is living that life. And she still doesn't know. This one is shorter, but I want to include it because it flips the dynamic. Instead of a confession about something done to someone else, this is a confession about watching someone else confess, about being the person on the other side of the screen. A Redditor posted that they had been scrolling a popular thread about anonymous confessions when they came across a story about a specific incident at a specific time in a specific type of location that they immediately recognized. The details in the post weren't about them. The confession was about something done to a third party. But the circumstances of how it had happened, the who, the where, the when, mapped exactly to something they had been present for years earlier, something they had always believed was an accident, something they had grieved and processed and eventually made peace with. The confession they were reading described it as deliberate. They sat there, they wrote, for a long time, just staring at the screen. They said they didn't know what to do with that. They didn't know if reporting it would do anything. They didn't know if they had the strength to reopen something that had cost them so much to close. They posted because they didn't know who else to tell, because the one person they would have told was the person described in the post. The comments on their response were gentle in a way that Reddit rarely is. Nobody pushed them to act. Nobody demanded more details. People just stayed with them in it. I want to end on this one because it is the simplest confession in this entire video, and in some ways the most disturbing because of what it implies, because of how many people upvoted it, because of how the community responded. It was posted using the confession bear format, the same format Naruto used, during the period when those posts were circulating widely. It was a different user, no name, no identifying details. The caption read, and I'm going to read it exactly as it was written, "I know my neighbor abuses his daughter. I haven't called because I don't want the hassle." 23 words. That post was shared thousands of times. It sparked enormous debate. People were furious. People were heartbroken. Some people came forward in the replies saying they understood the paralysis, the fear of being involved, the not knowing what would actually happen, the uncertainty about whether reporting would make things better or worse for the child. And some people said, none of that matters. There is a child. You said nothing. There was no resolution. The person never posted again. Nobody knows if they eventually called. Nobody knows what happened to that little girl. It's 23 words, and it's been sitting in people's heads for over a decade. 9 confessions. 9 real people who typed out something they had never said anywhere else. Some of them are still out there, walking around with these things inside them. Some of them got caught. Some of them we'll never know. Drop in the comments which one you can't stop thinking about. I read everything, every single comment. If you want more of this, we do this every week.